Hello, you're with Business Live from BBC News with Sally Bundock and Susanna Streeter.
Donald Trump gets ready to tell us how he intends to separate his business interests from affairs of state. But can he really avoid conflicts of interest?
That's the big question. Live from London, that is our top story today, Wednesday, the 11th of January. The billionaire has business interests all over the world. He'll try to reassure critics that those interests won't influence his policies. We'll talk you through what is at stake. Also in the programme, the heir to the Samsung empire faces questioning over South Korea's influence peddling scandal. We'll be live in Seoul for the very latest on that. And markets in Europe today look like this, all down just a touch. But let's not forget, they've been going up and up and up for days, it would seem. We'll talk you through the winners and the losers.
Plus, we'll meet the man who bought a failing factory and turned it into a thriving business feeding babies around the world. Plus, a new device has been launched to muzzle noisy phone calls in the office. What most distracts you at work?
The device for noisy people is called a Hush Me. Can't be used by presenters, I'm told. So send in your thoughts. Do get in touch. You know we like to hear from you. Now, let's move on and welcome to the show. In the last few hours, we've heard from President Obama, his farewell speech, with just over a week left in charge of the world's biggest economy. So today, his successor, Donald Trump, will be giving a long-awaited press conference, his first since winning the White House in November. And there are still big questions about how he will separate himself from his vast business interests. In his latest disclosure, the president-elect revealed interests in 144 companies, and these have had dealings in at least 25 countries in Asia, Europe, Africa, South America and North America. Democratic Party politicians are among those to express serious concerns this could influence his policy towards some of those countries. Now, he derives much of his income from developing real estate, also operating famous golf courses around the world in the US, Britain, Ireland and the United Arab Emirates. But he also makes money from licensing the Trump name to property developers around the world, and some of those projects have been engulfed in controversy. However, it should be noted that as president, he is legally allowed to continue to run his businesses. But previous presidents have put their businesses into blind trusts to prevent conflict of interest or the perception of them. Susanna, over to you.
Well, with me is Stephanie, who's an independent political risk analyst. Stephanie, this is all about trust. It's been such a divisive election campaign. What he says and what he does now is going to be crucial, isn't it, in regaining the trust of half the US population?
Exactly. This is a question about perception. So, as we just heard, he is legally allowed to run those businesses. However, he's already looking likely to run afoul of something called the Emoluments Clause, which is part of the US Constitution. Something like his Trump International Hotel in Washington, D.C. He's going to be in violation of the lease terms on that, which say that he can't, as an elected official, hold the lease on that hotel. So if he doesn't divest himself of his assets by January 20th, which looks highly unlikely unless we get a very surprise announcement today at his press conference, he is going to be in a position where it could look as though he might potentially be able to be manipulated or influenced, or could himself seek to manipulate or influence based on his global holdings.
And if he puts members of his family in key positions, that's going to have a big implication as well, isn't it? And they too will have to show that they have divested their interests.
Exactly. The purpose of a blind trust is that you would sell all of his assets, hand over the money to an independent administrator who runs that administrative fund for the entire time that he's president, and he would have no idea what's in that fund. That's not what we're seeing. What we're seeing now is that he's proposing that his two adult sons run the Trump organization. Now, He knows what's still in his investment portfolio. Everyone knows what's still in his investment portfolio in terms of what's public. And obviously, he's still going to be having a relationship with his two sons. So the potential for conflict of interest there is very high.
We've also got Rex Tillerson, who said he's going to sell off his share options and interests in ExxonMobil, who was, of course, CEO. Is that enough, do you think, in regaining trust there?
That one's a little bit easier in the sense that it's easier to sell shares than it is real estate. Everybody knows that there's these properties, they know who's the owner, and there's very few people who can afford to buy these sorts of properties, whereas shares are a lot easier. So in that case, Mr. Tillerson's divestment process is probably more straightforward than what the president-elect faces.
OK, Stephanie Hare, thank you very much for talking to us here on Business Live.
When that press conference starts, we'll be across it here on the BBC. Now let's have a look at some other stories. Volkswagen's management and supervisory board are expected to meet today to sign off an agreement with the US Department of Justice. A draft settlement's been reached for a $4.3 billion fine, which would draw a line under the emissions cheating scandal in the United States. The German car maker also said it would plead guilty to breaking certain US laws. The company's admitted cheating tests on its vehicles and already agreed to $15 billion in other settlements.
Prosecutors in the United States have charged 3 UK-based former currency traders with trying to rig foreign exchange rates. They worked at JP Morgan, Citigroup and Barclays. In 2015, the 3 banks, as well as RBS, paid $2.5 billion in fines after pleading guilty to conspiring to rig foreign exchange rates. Lawyers for each of the 3 have denied they did anything wrong. The UK authorities decided not to bring any charges after looking into the allegations.
And the Turkish lira has been under a lot of pressure again today, hitting new lows against the US dollar. During Asia's morning trade, it fell another 0.5% to reach almost 3.8 to the dollar. It's one of the worst performing currencies in the world over the last 12 months. The economy suffered because of continuing conflicts with Kurdish militants and so-called Islamic State. On Tuesday, Turkey's central bank took action to try and prop up the lira. It would seem it's not really having an effect at the moment.
Well, let's look at some breaking news on our BBC Live page. And there's a story here really about the provenance of food, because the UK company Whitbread has apologised over its beef lasagna. Lovely appetising picture there, but apparently there were reports that its beef lasagna included pork, which of course some people don't eat for religious reasons.
Yeah, Whitbread has said some menus at its outlets had not been properly updated. It's issued an apology for that. It's quite a big player in the UK. It has many outlets, including Brewers Fayre, Table, and also as well Costa Coffee chain. So it's quite an interesting story.
Prosecutors in South Korea have said in the last couple of hours that Lee Jae-yong, who is the de facto head of Samsung, is now a criminal suspect in the corruption inquiry that's already led to the impeachment of the country's president. Steve Evans is in Seoul.
Yeah, let's talk to Steve now, who's in the South Korean capital. Steve, tell us more. This is pretty major, isn't it, in terms of the development on this story?
It is. The allegation is that Samsung paid $18 million to a fund in Germany controlled by the best friend of the president of this country. And the allegation is being investigated that in return, Samsung got the votes of the National Pension Fund for a big restructuring of the company. In 2015, the ruling family wanted to merge 2 bits of Samsung. Outside shareholders said, that's only so you can strengthen your hold on the company. It's not in the interest of the shareholders. But, so the allegation goes, the National Pension Fund put its votes behind the family. The prosecutor now thinks that that may be because it had given money to the friend of the president in the first place. So that's the allegation. J.Y. Lee, the heir to the whole company and the man in charge, because his father has been seriously ill for more than a year, has been told to appear at the prosecutor's office at 9:30 on Thursday morning. So it's a very serious turn of events and potentially very damaging for the company.
All right, at the end of what's been a very damaging time for them in general. Thanks a lot, Steve. We'll talk to Steve again on Thursday, I'm sure, as that unfolds. Let's look at markets then. So in Asia, they had a fairly good day. You can see Japan and Hong Kong up. Looking at Europe now, quite interesting to see what stocks are on the move. Let's have a look at how Europe's faring. We've got VW shares up 1% in Frankfurt. Of course, big day for VW if it does confirm that it's come up with a deal with the US authorities on the emissions cheating scandal. In London, we've got all the supermarkets dominating. Lots of news coming from the big retailers in the UK about how they fared over Christmas. So Sainsbury's shares up 3.5%, Morrison shares up 4.5%, another big supermarket chain here in the UK. We'll talk about that in detail in a moment, but that's very much a dominating story this week for the UK retail. Lots happening in the US. We've already mentioned, of course, Donald Trump's press conference. Let's hear some more from Michelle Fleury on what's ahead today and what Wall Street is watching.
As well as Donald Trump's press conference, where he's expected to discuss the future of his businesses, the topic of conflicts of interest is also likely to pop up at a hearing for his pick of Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson. Mr. Tillerson has already released a 38-page financial disclosure filing, but members of the Senate will want to probe his stance on Russia, as well as his relationship with ExxonMobil, the oil giant where he served as chief executive until this year. Just to give you an example, if the Trump administration lifts Russian sanctions, ExxonMobil would be able to move forward with deals worth billions of dollars. So lawmakers will want to ensure that Mr. Tillerson is working in the interest of the US people and not for his former company.
Well, with all eyes in the United States on that press conference a little later, let's have a chat with Richard Fletcher, who's the business editor of The Times.
Good morning, Richard.
Yeah, what impact has there been so far on the dollar in expectation of what Mr. Trump is going to say?
Well, we've seen the dollar strengthen in the last few weeks and months. We've obviously seen that, although overnight we saw it sort of fall back a bit against a basket of currencies, although not against the pound. So the markets will definitely have at least one eye on Trump today. I suppose the expectation is for the US economy, the market appears to have concluded that many of his policies are going to be good. You know, it's a boost, it's a fiscal boost, but there is this fear about protectionism and what it means for trade and what it means for the US relationship with China.
It's quite interesting, actually, because the World Bank Global Outlook was out today, and that sort of outlines that real uncertainty about the US and what impact it's going to have on the global economy. But quite interesting what Michelle said. I think for the first time, more than ever, not for the first time, but more than ever, we've got this issue of business interest and being in that senior position. And it's not just, as Michelle said, Donald Trump, it's Rex Tillerson as well, head of ExxonMobil.
Absolutely, and although we've had lots of pronouncements on Twitter, we haven't actually had many public pronouncements. We haven't had, you know, a big press conference. So it's going to be fascinating for the market, and it'll be a fascinating, you know, few days ahead.
And interesting as well that algorithms are now really having to adapt to the tweets, aren't they? That policies seems to be indicated by Donald Trump's tweets, and they're having to adapt to that like they have done with news stories appearing on the wires in the past.
Absolutely. There's always seems to be a pause between the first tweet and the second tweet, so he's obviously either very slow at typing or he's keeping us in suspense.
Richard, very quickly, UK retail big week.
Yeah, so we had Next last week, which was disappointing. We've had Morrison's yesterday, which was good. Sainsbury's today, which was good. And then for UK retail, tomorrow is a massive day. We get Marks and Spencer's, we get Debenhams, we get Tesco. So really, at the end of tomorrow, we can conclude whether in the UK at least it was a good Christmas or a bad Christmas for retailers.
Interesting that at the moment we've got a story out, reports that Walmart in the US is trying to restructure to focus on its online offering. I'm sure UK retailers will be, in fact, doing the same, and it'll come out in those results tomorrow.
Indeed. Now, Richard will be back in about 5 minutes. He's not done yet. We've got some good paper stories to discuss, including the Hush Me, which is an amazing gadget.
It certainly is. Shuts up noisy office workers. Do you want one?
I can't think of anyone in particular. But anyway, let's talk about what else is in the programme. We've got a story that comes straight out of a movie. Our next guest hasn't just rescued a failing factory, he's saved jobs, is feeding babies around the world.
Yes, you're with Business Live from BBC News. Stay tuned.
Donald Trump's election, Brexit, the rising tide of opposition against political elites. Davos 2017's theme of responsive and responsible leadership has never been so relevant. Leaders in business, politics and culture will gather to tackle the profound changes shaping this new landscape at this year's World Economic Forum. We'll have all the analysis, interviews and live coverage from Davos on BBC World News.
Growing up, Mom certainly gave us a wide range of tools to become the people who we are. That being said, my brother was kind of a regular guy who loved his friends. It wasn't until later that he became a little more serious. He became aware of the challenges that we face as a country, as a people, as a community. And I do think that he has changed. He has gotten wiser. But I would say that in terms of his relationships, who he is as a man, how he communicates, the things that he values, I think he has remained remarkably unchanged, actually. He will not miss, frankly, the intensity of the spotlight of recent years. I think that he'll continue working. He'll write, he'll speak, and hopefully he'll get some rest.
This is not a holiday program. This is the travel show, where the destination is just the beginning. Fall in love with places you've yet to discover and people you've never met. The Travel Show on BBC World News.
To understand curry, you have to understand the country behind it.
We don't have the word curry in our language at all.
Rick Stein is on a mission to delve into India's vibrant history to discover the origins of the dishes we love and the captivating cultures that created them.
I have to find the perfect curry.
From street food to fine dining.
That is unbelievable.
Save some room for Rick Stein's India on BBC World News.
Hello, you're watching Business Live. A reminder of our top story today. Donald Trump getting ready to unveil what steps he intends to take to make sure his business interests don't conflict with affairs of state.
And let's take a quick look at how the markets have been faring so far today. As you can see, slight drop really across the board in Europe anyway. But of course, that does follow on from a record-winning streak, particularly for the FTSE 100. Its 9th straight session in a row where there was a gain reaching a record level, so well above that 7,000 mark. DAX in Frankfurt, obviously Volkswagen shares are listed there, and there is repercussions coming out. We're expected to hear that Volkswagen is settling with the US authorities $4.3 billion for the Dieselgate scandal.
Now, when our next guest came across a factory in northern England making baby formula, it didn't seem like a particularly glowing prospect.
Business was really slow, so slow in fact that its owners were planning to shut it down.
But he was able to see the potential, and he managed to secure a deal to buy the factory.
Well, next followed a deal with China, which was just recovering from a scandal over contaminated infant formula.
And China now makes up 1/3 of the company's business, so it would seem like that was quite a good move.
The raw materials are all sourced locally, using 220 farms in the region to provide the milk.
And the business is expanding. It's now branching into the profitable health sector as well.
Well, I'm pleased to say that Ross McMahon, the boss of Kendall NutriCare, joins us now in the studio. Thanks very much for coming in. So how did you manage to get into China? It's kind of the holy grail. What did you do, and how is the approach different to, say, trying to get into the UK supermarket?
Well, I researched the market for 5 years, so I had a lot of the research done before I bought the facility, and then I settled on working with the state-owned company Orient International Shanghai Foreign Trade Company. I met this great man, Mr. Chen Yi, and his team, and they have worked very closely with me over the years. They've been patient, waiting for me to buy the facility. They've launched the product in August. It's now in 4,500 stores. By February, it'll be in 6,000 stores in 90% of China.
And just to put this all in perspective, when you were in discussion with these Chinese business people,
yes,
China was just coming out of a terrible baby milk scandal, wasn't it, where Chinese-made baby powder was causing babies to be extremely unwell. Some actually died.
Yes.
So that had an enormous impact on the thinking of every mum, I would imagine, in China.
Yeah, there was a tremendous loss of confidence in Chinese domestic product. They really were looking all over the world. Britain has the best quality milk on its doorstep.
Well, I would imagine other countries will, will counter that, like Australia, for example, which is importing a lot of baby milk into China, isn't it?
Well, we saw a gap in the market with Kendamil to put the full cream, mammal's milk fat, natural raw material back into the product, where we saw multinationals were actually, to save money, were putting in oils and using skim milk, while it's much more natural to use the full cream of the whole milk, which is a natural mammal's milk fat.
This was a real gamble, though, wasn't it? Because the factory that you bought was failing. What did you see when you went to visit that factory? What were your thoughts about turning it around?
Well, first of all, it's a world-class facility. It was built by Glaxo 55 years ago. The staff have tremendous knowledge. It's an absolute privilege to lead them because they have such a bank of knowledge, and we share this vision, and everyone is so excited about Kendamil going all over the world. It represents the brand name of the town. All the products we launch, Kendamil cow formula, Kendamil goat formula, Kendamil organic, and now Kenda Life for adults, will all be a reflection of the town. So the community is actually really strongly behind us.
But you've had massive success, say, for example, in China.
Yes.
And culturally it's very different in China in the sense that baby milk products, there's more demand because the way, you know, the family works, the family network, in many cases is the grandparents looking after babies, isn't it? Therefore, the baby milk products. But here in the UK, for example, you've not had as much success. You know, Danone and Nestle dominate the market here, don't they?
They actually dominate the market, but there is a gap because their formulations are very similar. We're the only one using the unique milk fat, putting the cream of the milk back into the product.
But how are you going to get into the marketplace? Because it's difficult, isn't it?
We're getting fantastic feedback from consumers, testimonials from families across the UK, less digestive problems, better sleeping patterns, you know. So people really embrace the quality of the product. And I think it's the quality of the product, competitively priced. The supermarkets are all ringing us up now, and we're, you know, in meetings and discussions with them. Hopefully it'll be available in the UK market by the summer.
Okay, Ross McMahon, good luck, and thank you very much for coming in to talk to us on Business Live.
Thanks very much, Susanna.
Now, in a moment, we will look at the stories in the business pages, including the Hush Me. We'll explain what it is. I've been referring to it many, many times, and many of you have got in touch about that story. First, though, here's how to stay in touch with us.
The Business Live page is where you can stay ahead with all the day's breaking business news. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest details, with insight and analysis from the BBC's team of editors right around the world. And we want to hear from you too. Get involved on the BBC Business Live webpage at bbc.com/business. On Twitter, we're at BBC Business, and you can find us on Facebook at BBC Business News. Business Live on TV and online, whenever you need to know.
Okay, we've been talking about the Hush Me all morning, so we're going to explain what it is now while we look at the papers with Richard, who's back here with us.
So, Richard, it's in The Guardian, isn't it? Phone gadget shuts up the office loud mouth. It sounds like a gift.
Absolutely. It's the,
but it looks terrible, look at it.
It does rank as one of the strangest devices to come out of the CES conference you have in Las Vegas, which was last week. So there was great amusement in the Times editorial meeting yesterday when we were discussing it. So you strap it to your mouth and it stops colleagues being annoyed by your loud conversations. I'm sure you've had a few tweets from my colleagues suggesting I should.
Okay, all right. They think you should have one at work at the Times. I mean, how does it work? So you strap it on. You can have a conversation on the phone, and you can be very loud, but people
absolutely
around
no one around hears you, and you get Bluetooth through your earphones, so you can still hear what the other person is saying, and it plays music over your conversation, so that even if colleagues are very close, all they hear are kind of calming tree,
you know, that sort of
relaxation music.
We've got a tweet from Joe says, can they please hand these out on trains? That would be actually quite a good idea.
Although I'm not sure I'd want to use someone else's after they've used it, to be honest.
OK, we've got loads of tweets here. Simon says, really? I get frustrated when the office resembles a library. I need an atmosphere. I do get that, actually.
Yeah.
I don't like anywhere being too quiet. Max, it's got to be snoring.
That's
Snoring.
good, yes.
Wear it at night.
Yeah, that's.
But will there be breathing issues?
Yeah, I'm not sure you want to wear it for 9 hours.
No, it's not very attractive.
Jeff has a whole list of things that annoy him
Come
in
on
the
then,
office.
Jeff.
Noisy keyboards, people cooking smelly fish in the microwave, sniffing, loud keyboards, and people talking with their mouths full of food.
I have to say, someone cooked kippers down here once, and honestly, I nearly couldn't function here that particular day. Right, Financial Times. Deutsche Bank scours social media to find talent. Now, this is interesting. We all know about the fact that when you apply for a job, they're going to look you up. They're going to find out what you've been saying on Facebook, etc. But this is the bank actually looking for people on social media and then approaching them.
Absolutely. So Deutsche Bank is worried that people aren't applying to the bank who they'd like to employ, partly because banking hasn't got the reputation it once had.
And they, in particular, have had a lot of bad headlines.
Absolutely. So what they are doing is, as well as encouraging people to apply, they are searching out for graduates by searching their social media profiles, Twitter, LinkedIn, looking at what clubs they're a member of. But as one rival puts it, this is a bit like, you know, your very uncle bank turning up at the sort of graduate party, waving a brochure. It does feel slightly creepy, but I suppose it is a reminder to all of us that what's on social media will come back to bite us one day.
Being stalked on social media, on LinkedIn, is actually what they want, isn't it? It's a gift for LinkedIn, in fact, isn't it?
Yeah, for LinkedIn, absolutely. Whether for Twitter, you'd be quite as happy about your bank seeing your Twitter feed.
Richard, thanks for coming in. It's been great to have your contribution as ever.
And that's it from Business Live. There will be, of course, more business news throughout the day on the BBC Live webpage. We'll be keeping you updated on that press conference from Donald Trump. Goodbye.
This season, we've got the Premier League covered, with all the action before, during and after the game. Sport Today tackles the breaking news, and for pre-game analysis, Football Focus is here every weekend talking to the big names.
What did you know about Liverpool as a young man?
It depends on what is a young man.
You can go online for the latest news, gossip and live coverage, and download the BBC Sport app for score and news alerts on your favourite team. Whatever happens in the league this year, we have it covered.
Rauschenberg was a new type of artist, one who embraced popular culture in all its trashy glory and expanded the possibilities of what an artwork could be. From paintings and sculptures to paintings and sculptures combined.
He was able to break all these rules and dissolve all of these boundaries because he wasn't afraid of the consequences.
From silkscreens and blueprints to works on metal and glass.
Bob is the wind blowing through the art world for almost a century now, pollinating everything.
From set and costume design to collaborations with musicians, dancers, and even scientists. Rauschenberg's endless curiosity saw him rewrite the artistic rulebook and anticipate every major art movement from the 50s onwards.
Rauschenberg once said that the whole world was his canvas. He was always a scavenger, collecting life's flotsam and jetsam to create his wildly, raucously inventive works of art. And anything and everything could be a material for him. Socks, old bedspreads, light bulbs, fans, mangled car parts, metal signs, even a common car tyre. Made of rubber. Made of petroleum, made from crude oil.
However far he travelled from his hometown of Port Arthur, it was the product of those dirty Texan oil refineries that would fuel the best of his art and keep him grounded.
A Humboldt squid. They have a local reputation as man-eaters.
This airport in Cyprus has been abandoned for over 40 years, and that plane has become a monument for the divided island. Could the talks in Geneva culminate in peace and bring back life here? Join me, Selin Girit, on BBC World News as we cover what's ahead for Cyprus.
To fully understand what's happening in your own economy, you need to know what's going on elsewhere.
The only way out of poverty is for people to have jobs.
But employers complain they can't find people with the skills they need.
Each week, Talking Business travels the world to discuss the big economic questions with experts